So what we're going to do this evening is, first of all, we'll do some meditation, and then we'll have our home groups. We'll review the practice that we've done over the course of the week. Then we'll have a little break. And tonight we're going to, after the break, look at our theme for this week, which is mindfulness of feelings, what's called Vedana. I'll say more about that soon. And then we'll finish the evening by setting up our home practice. So there's a few items that we'll take home with us to practice during the course of the week. So what I wanted to do tonight with the meditation is, first of all, show you a video. So today we're going to be looking a little bit more at the breath. So last week we began our exploration of the four satipatthanas, the four foundations of mindfulness, as they're sometimes called. The first of them being the body and its movements. So the breath is part of our body and its movements. It's a really central experience of the body that we have. And it's a classic meditation practice in the Buddhist tradition, mindfulness of breathing. So what we've done so far in our meditation practices is we've been just paying attention to the different experiences, the different sensations, the experience of touch and so on in our body by doing a kind of a tour, as it were, with awareness through those different parts. So we're going to begin by doing that in this meditation. And that's typically what one would do when one begins meditation, is to just explore, notice what the body is doing. After that, after we've explored the sensations of our body, we're going to pay attention to the breathing in particular, particularly the way that our body moves as we breathe. Yeah, so that's going to be a particular focus. So there's actually quite a bit more going on when we breathe than we realize. There's quite a bit going on in different parts of our body. And the breathing is activated by the movement of various diaphragms in the body. So a diaphragm is like a membrane that separates two different sections of something. So the main diaphragm that functions when we breathe is the diaphragm around the base of our ribs. Yeah. So when it moves down, it presses down on our internal organs, and there's a vacuum created, and our lungs fill with air. So our lungs are kind of like passive; they don't have any muscles in them; they're just passive. So when that the diaphragm moves down, there's a vacuum created, and air comes into our lungs, and when it relaxes, the air is expelled. But there's also some other diaphragms in the body which also are activated when we breathe. So what I wanted to do is actually show you a little video. And the video demonstrates what's happening when we breathe. And it's a bit surprising, or you might find it surprising, just to notice what happens. So what I'd encourage you to do is, when you're watching the video, see if you can locate in your own body the corresponding movement to what you're watching on the screen. It's so what you'll see is an image of a body with just the skeleton and various muscles and so on. So hopefully that's not too gruesome. There's no blood, but it's sort of slightly stylized, and there's also, the movements are exaggerated, just to really make it clear the movements that are happening. So what I'm going to do is just to help us to experience the body and the different aspects of our breathing. We're going to watch this video. So I'll play it now. Just give me a second to. So don't worry too much about what's on the right. There's various glands and plexuses and things. So 7 levels. What we're interested in is the 4 diaphragms. So I'll just set this going now. So there's these 4 diaphragms that function. So there's the cervical diaphragm, which there's an expansion of the brains when we breathe. So believe it or not, there's actually movement in the skull and the brain when we breathe. And then there's the muscles of the throat, the jaw, and the nape of the neck. Then there's a thoracic diaphragm, which is what we would normally refer to when we're talking about the diaphragm. And then there's a pelvic diaphragm. So this is sometimes called the pelvic floor. So when we breathe, all of those diaphragms move. So what I'll do is I'll just play that again and see if you can just, as you so see if you can just notice that movement in the skull as you breathe. Don't worry if you can't detect it immediately. Just see if you can have a sense of the brain and the influence of the breath on that part of the body. And then the throat area. Oopsie daisy. So the throat area. Oh, don't know what I did there. And then paying attention to the diaphragm, the thoracic diaphragm. And then the pelvic floor. So now just tuning into your breathing in those different parts of the diaphragm. And here it demonstrates the way that it presses down on the viscera, the different organs in the lower part of our abdomen. So can you feel that happening in your body? That's just an illustration of some of the muscles that work as we breathe. And notice the way the spine actually flexes as we breathe as well. So again, the movement is exaggerated, but hopefully it'll help you to locate what's going on in your own body. And then again in the throat. And there's the intercostal muscles between the ribs that also are activated. And the abdomen. So there's quite a bit going on as you breathe. So the breath influences much more of our body than we generally suppose. So what I'd invite you to do now is to get into your meditation posture. That might be just sitting on a chair, or you might like to sit on the floor in some way. So we're going to meditate now for about 20 minutes. So just making sure that you're not going to be interrupted when you meditate or distracted by anything, and making a clear, definite decision that for the next 20 minutes, you're going to give your attention to your body and the movement in your body. And then bringing your attention into the room that you're sitting in and just having a sense of where you are. So what's around you, the place where your body is located. And then just getting an overall sense of your body, not as an image now, not as video, but as direct experience and sensation. And as you move your attention through your body, noticing how some parts of the body feel pleasant. There might be a feeling of well-being, pleasure, and other parts might feel uncomfortable or painful. So that's part of our ongoing experience of our body, the experience of pleasure and the experience of pain, and also the experience of neither pleasure nor pain. So we know a part of the body is there, but it doesn't have a particular feeling tone associated with it. So beginning by paying attention to the body in the head area, particularly the face. The forehead and the eyes, the nose and the nostrils, the mouth, the tongue, and associated with the nose and the mouth are the associated senses of smell and taste. And the experience of the mouth also reminds us of the fact that our body has an interior as well as the exterior skin. So what's going on by way of sensation within your head, within the brain, the eyes, the ears, the sinuses? It's being curious. What about the scalp, the neck and the throat? The shoulders, the right arm and the right hand. the left arm, and the left hand. Particularly noticing the experience of touch, the hands touching what it is that they're resting on. And then bringing the awareness to the chest, the shoulders, the upper back, the armpits, skin touching clothing. Maybe again you can feel the influence of the breathing on that part. The middle part of the torso, so the base of the rib cage at the front, the sides and the back. The belly, the waist, the lower back, skin touching clothing, the pressure of your belt or waistband against your belly, the buttocks resting on what you're sitting on. Aware of the upper legs, the knees, the lower legs and the feet. So really feeling that sense of surrendering the total weight of your body to the floor, to what you're sitting on. So really being where you are, sitting on what you're sitting on as fully as possible. And where there's holding or tension or gripping, bringing awareness to that place. A kindly, curious awareness, and allowing that to soak into that tension, that holding or gripping. And being sensitive to the body as the receptor of pleasant feeling and painful feeling. And just opening to that, opening to the reality, the fact that some parts of our body might feel uncomfortable, as well as other parts feeling well, experiencing pleasure perhaps. So our body is not just a thing, it's not just flesh and bone and blood and organs. It's alive with feeling and sensation. So sensitive to that as well. And now beginning to explore the way that your body moves as you breathe. So the movement isn't as obvious or as vigorous as, for example, walking, but nevertheless there is movement taking place in a more subtle way when you breathe. So beginning by placing your attention at the base of your pelvis, in the basin, as it were, of your pelvis, the pelvic floor. Seeing if you can notice any movement in those muscles of the pelvic floor. Notice the way that movement also has rhythm, in and out, tension, relaxation. What about in the lower back? That whole soft part of the body from the belly, the waist, the lower back. Maybe you can feel the movement of your skin against your clothing, and the inside as well, moving. Do you notice anything in the diaphragm, that main thoracic diaphragm that is just around the base of the rib cage? It's almost as if it's massaging your internal organs as you breathe. What movement do you notice in the lungs? The interior of the rib cage. So the images from the video might come to you. Trying to find the corresponding experience to the video images in your chest. Can you feel the movement of the ribs at the front, the sides and the back? The collarbones and the shoulders and the shoulder blades moving also. What about in the throat, the neck? What do you notice there by way of movement? Even if it's very subtle, very fine. Not worrying if you can't feel anything or notice anything particular. Just bringing your attention to that part of the body. Maybe it's just an energy thing, the way the energy in your body changes as you pay attention to your breathing. And the brain. What's going on in the brain? in the head and the skull when you breathe. Now getting a sense of the different parts, the skull, the throat, the torso, and the breathing. It's as if the whole body is actually breathing. It really is. And while the arms and the legs are not literally breathing, you might sense movement there also. Movement may be in energy, if not actual physical movement. So we'll just sit now for a couple of minutes, just in silence with whatever's going on. And so this will just be for 3 minutes. So to begin with, just again tuning into your body and the sensations arising in your body. So you could start by just feeling your feet and your legs in contact with what it is that your body is resting on. Maybe you can also feel the backs of your legs if you're sitting on a chair. So getting a sense of your body as mass, as weight, and the way that gravity has an effect on that we're rooted to the floor through gravity, through weight, through mass. And then closing our eyes if we haven't done so already, and beginning to just listen to the sounds that are present. Don't worry so much about what's producing the sound, but just noticing the reality of sound, the fact of sound. Noticing that when we pay attention to sound, we also get a sense of space, of existing in relation to other objects and other parts of space. And then tuning into our breathing. So tuning into the most obvious aspect of our breathing, it might be the movement of the breathing in our abdomen. And then you can just bring that short meditation to a finish, to a close. So I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but for now I just wanted to get stuck into some of these questions. So there's lots of questions coming in. So can you say something about discursive thought during meditation? So basically our overall experience, there's lots of different strands of experience all the time. So that's partly what these satipatthanas that we're exploring are. So they're different strands of experience. So there's our body, and then there's the sensations that arise in our body, and there's all the different feelings, and there's our mind, there's our thoughts. So what you'll find is that when you start paying attention, you'll start noticing those different strands. And what we're doing when we're practicing mindfulness is we're giving our attention to one of those strands of experience. It's a little bit like with vision. You've got your peripheral vision and your central vision. So we tend to, when we look at something, we choose what we're going to attend to. So for example, right now I'm looking at the camera at the top of my laptop. So that's what where my focus is. But I'm also peripherally aware of the room that I'm sitting in. I'm not focusing on it, but I'm aware that it's there. So it's a little bit like that with mindfulness practice. We're giving our central focus to a particular part of our experience. So what we just did in the meditation earlier on is we paid attention first of all to the different parts of our body and then to our breathing. So that became the focus. But the other things will be there, and that's okay. It's not that you're trying to push those other things away. It's just that you're trying to make that aspect of your experience, your breathing, for example, the focus of your attention. Now, what happens is if you stay with that, your attention will deepen. You'll become more and more absorbed in that particular aspect of your experience, for example, your breathing. And those other peripheral aspects will have less and less pull. Now, what can happen is, what often happens actually, is that particularly with thoughts, your thoughts will arise, and your focus shifts to that thought when it arises in your mind. So a thought arises, maybe it's something about work or some interpersonal conflict with somebody that you're worried about. And immediately what happens is you start paying attention, or you stop giving your central focus to your breathing, and your central focus moves to your thoughts. And what we're trying to do is just notice that. Every time we notice that that's happened, we can just drop it and come back to what it is that we're trying to focus on. So it's quite natural for that to happen. So don't worry about it. And it's worth knowing, it's worth remembering that every time you notice that you're not paying attention, you've started paying attention. So every time you've noticed that you're no longer being mindful, you've just started being mindful. And I think that's really, really important. So don't worry about discursive thought. Don't try and push it away. Just give your attention to your body, to something else. And eventually, if you keep doing that, your attention on your body will deepen, particularly when you start paying attention to your breathing. So that might also clear up maybe some misunderstanding about mindful walking. So when you're mindfully walking, it's like the focus of your attention will be on your body. But of course, you'll have peripheral awareness of what's going on around you. You'll have to have that, otherwise you might walk into a bus or something, or into a lamppost. So you need that peripheral vision, that peripheral awareness rather, so that you kind of know where you are, but you keep your attention on your body. And that can have, and particularly with walking and particularly with breathing, because there's a rhythmic element to it. The breath comes in, the breath goes out, you walk forward with one foot after another. That kind of rhythm brings with it a sort of soothing. It sort of soothes the mind, particularly if there's agitation or upset or distress. It can have a really strongly soothing kind of effect on the mind. So hopefully that clears things up a little bit. Yeah, so that's in the same way that when you're doing the mindfulness of breathing, you're choosing to give your attention to your breathing. When you do mindful walking, you're choosing to give the most part of your awareness to your body. But I mean, I'll just say it one more time because I think it's really important. It's not that you're trying to push anything away. If you get into pushing parts of your experience away, you'll get tense, and whatever concentration you're able to develop will kind of be quite fragile, even quite sort of brittle. So you want to just, it's more about leading with curiosity. That's the key factor actually. It's like you're deciding to pay attention to your breathing or to your walking in whichever practice you're doing. And it's curiosity that will lead you deeper. So there was one question, how can we make staying with the body in meditation more interesting? Myself and some of our group have found that going away in thoughts has been more interesting than staying with the body in meditation. And that is a real challenge. That is probably one of the biggest challenges with meditation, is to get is to try and develop that interest, which is another way of saying curiosity, in your breathing, so that in a way it's more interesting to you. You're more engrossed in that than you are in your thoughts. And particularly if you're busy and you're involved in a lot of different conversations and work and different levels, it's quite difficult to make that shift. It might take a little while for the mind, for the thinking kind of mind, just to kind of settle down a bit. But it does settle down if you give it time. But what'll happen is if you sit down to meditate and your mind is very busy and you try and stop it being busy actively and forcefully, you'll probably end up with it'll probably end up being unpleasant, and you might give yourself a headache. So just be careful of that. Yeah, when doing the mindful walking, how focused should one be on would be on the feet, for example, or should it be an overall body thing? I think it depends how concentrated you are. So you can you can, if you need to, you can focus your body just on the soles of your feet. That's a really, really good way of doing it. If you really need to focus your mind, just pay attention to the touch of the soles of your feet on the ground as you walk, or at least on the inside of your shoes or whatever. That's a really, really good way of doing it. A really good place to come back to, particularly if your mind is all over the place. If you're already a bit more concentrated, you could have a more of a general sense, but you're probably going to be giving your attention to the body lower down in the body, because that's where most of the movement's happening. So in the legs and the hips particularly. And that will also give you a sense, particularly if you're anxious, of being a bit more rooted to the ground, rooted to the earth. Is it possible to heal a physical symptom with mindfulness meditation? I think it depends what it is. But I would say, for example, if you've got a lot of tension in your stomach, in your abdomen, that can lead to all kinds of issues with your digestion. So I think it can. One of the things that mindfulness does is it tends to relieve tension, and tension can cause all kinds of physical problems, where we're gripping muscles where we don't need to. So I would say it could. It just depends on what it is. I mean, if you've got something going on that's more serious, it might not be able to help. But what it will do, and this is what's really key, and this in a way links in with what I want to talk about next, is if there are painful experiences going on in your body, what it will help you to do, mindfulness, is become more equanimous and more creative in response to them, and not let those painful experiences in the body determine your overall mood and your overall state of mind. And that's like a really, really important thing about mindfulness. So I think I've got all the questions there. So what I want to do now is just...
If you're in Slack, Yanadara, sorry.
Oh, is there? Oh, goodness. Okay. Yeah, can you make any suggestions on the way to improve focus during the mindful walk? Yeah, like I say, if you need to be more focused, focus on the soles of your feet. Just focus on that. And I think there's a real skill. And like, I'll give you an example. Like, so when I finish this class, I'll be walking home up the hill. I live about 20 minutes away from the centre, and there'll be a lot of stuff buzzing around in my mind because I've just been talking for 2 hours. So my mind will be quite active. Now, there's no point in me trying to stop that, because I'll just end up getting tense. So the thing for me, what I've been trying to do recently, is just let the thoughts come into my mind and float away again. So it's just a little bit like watching clouds, or watching, like at this time of the year, often you get a lot of leaf matter in rivers, and just watching the river, the leaves flow down the river, just like watching the thoughts flow through your mind and not getting involved in them. That's the kind of practice. Hopefully that's clear. Why exactly is mindfulness so difficult to practice? Is it because our minds are constantly trying to resolve problems? It can be that. It can be, I think, we're trying to think our way out of our problems, and sometimes thought is not what we need. Attention is what we need. So what you get when you practice mindfulness is a synthesis between clear thinking about things and a positive state of mind. And then you can really begin to solve some of the much deeper problems that cause us so much suffering. You can start seeing through some of the assumptions that we make about our lives and how they cause us suffering. So, for example, make assumptions about things being permanent and unchanging. I mean, I think that's why at the moment, with all these restrictions around COVID and limits to behavior, uncertainty around what we can do and what we can't do, it really affects us, because we've got these assumptions that things should stay the same and that things should work around our preferences and our desires. So it's very, very uncomfortable, but it is an opportunity, I think, at the moment, just to see how deep our assumptions and our need for things to remain absolutely stable is. So I'm not saying it's a good thing, but we might as well take the opportunity to learn something about the way we relate to the world, because the only option is do that, or just to get frustrated and upset or pissed off. So it is a there's another question here. Do you have to like everyone because you meditate as be nice to everyone? No, you don't have to like everybody. I mean, what we would probably say is it's impossible probably to develop your mind in a way where you like everybody. What you might be able to do is develop a way that where you're not going to hate anybody, that you can be kind to other people, and that's really what we can do. We can learn to be kind to people and patient with people that we don't like, because we'll probably never get to a state where we like everybody. We'll always like some people more than others. So that, in a way, quite nicely ties in with what I wanted to talk about this evening. So the theme for this week is mindfulness of feelings. Now, when we use that word feelings in this context, we're using it in a very specific sense. We don't mean emotion. We just mean the kind of raw experience of pleasure or pain that we have when one of our senses comes into contact with something external. So every time we have an experience, it has a feeling tone associated with it. There's a word for this. I mentioned last week the Satipatthanas, so the foundations of mindfulness, or the 4 applications of mindfulness. So the body is the first of the 4, and mindfulness of feelings is the second of the 4. The other 2 are mind and teachings. So what I want to do is just introduce another Pali term, which is, I'll just bring it up on your screen. So mindfulness, so Vedana is feeling tone. So when we're talking about feelings, mindfulness of feelings, we mean, I'm going to start using this word Vedana just because it's a little bit more precise. Like I said, when we use the word feeling, we can either mean, if I say that hurt my feelings, it's a bit ambiguous as to what we mean. Obviously something painful's happened, but there's all kinds of emotions involved. So feeling can mean emotion or sensation in English. So Vedana is much more precise, and it means that kind of a feeling tone. So it's not emotion, that's part of mind. That comes next week, but feeling is just that immediate sensation that we experience when we encounter something. So, for example, well, the example that we just had. So if you meet somebody that you don't like, you'll have a painful Vedana, you'll have a painful feeling tone. If somebody that is a friend of yours says something to you which you find disagreeable, they criticize you, you're likely to have a painful feeling. Very often we just find people kind of neutral. So it seems to be that it's when we encounter other people that we have the most vivid experience of Vedana, and then the strength of it is much more intense. But we also have Vedana when we encounter different kinds of sense experience through our physical senses. So, for example, if you put chocolate in your mouth, for most people, that will be a pleasant Vedana. If you put sand in your mouth, that'll most probably be a painful Vedana. Similarly with, sounds. So today I was working at home, and the next door house is having a lot of work done on it, and we had roofers on the house, and they were chucking the slates from the roof onto the ground, and they were smashing on the ground. So we had that for a couple of hours. So that was an unpleasant Vedana. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't particularly pleasant. And that's different from, let's say, listen to a bit of music and, the pleasure that you get from that. So what you're sort of hopefully building up is a sense that Vedana, this experience that we have every time we encounter something, and it happens all the time, it's never not there. It can be of 3 kinds. So first of all, you've got pleasant Vedana, so pleasant feeling tone. So this is when we encounter something that we like, that feels good. Like it's kind of like the yum feeling, yum. So food, sensation with the body. So maybe like this today, it was a bit cooler, but I went to the park and I was just standing in the sun, And just feeling the sun on my body was pleasant. That's a pleasant Vedana. There's also painful Vedana. So, this was I went out of the house and I foolishly didn't wear a jacket, and I was just a bit cold. I was sitting in the wind with a friend, and I just got feeling a bit cold. So it's painful. It wasn't terribly painful, but it was, uncomfortable. Similarly, right now, for some reason, I've got a slight headache. So it's just painful. Most of my body feels quite well. There's pleasant Vedana, but there's a bit of painful Vedana as well. So there is another kind of Vedana, and that's neutral Vedana. So neutral Vedana really is Vedana that's neither strongly pleasant nor strongly painful. So it sort of doesn't quite register. It's somewhere in the middle. So very often when you pay attention to your body, when we did that body scan earlier, and I was inviting you to notice the sensation in your body and whether it was painful or pleasant, probably a lot of you had the experience of parts of your body being kind of neither. So I often notice in my upper arms, there's nothing, I know that they're there, I can feel that they're there, but I don't feel them as being pleasant or painful. My hands, on the other hand, often there's quite a lot of sensation in the hands because there's more nerves. So often it's quite pleasant. If my hands are kind of warm, that'll be pleasant. If it's cold, then there might be that kind of unpleasant cold feeling in my fingers. So that would be an example of painful Vedana. But yeah, very often it's our experience of different parts of our body is just neutral. So one of the key things to know about Vedana, about feeling tone, is that we always have it, and we can't get rid of it. Not in the moment that it's happening. It's just part of life. It's just a given. It's usually arising because of something that's gone before. So the fact that we've got a body means that we're going to experience pleasure and pain. It's been set up in the past. It's been conditioned by what's happened in the past. What we can do is we can change the way we respond to Vedana. And this is where mindfulness really comes in handy. Well, it's not just comes in handy, it's absolutely crucial and essential to that process. So if we're able to notice the fact that we're having a particular Vedana, we can learn to respond creatively to it. So I just want to talk about that a little bit in relation to these different kinds of Vedana. So what I'm saying basically is if we don't notice Vedana, we'll tend to react to it instinctively. If there's no attention, if there's no awareness, it's as if there's just a mechanism where we react to these Vedanas when they happen. And then we're likely to get into a negative state of mind, which is what we're going to look at next week. But we can do something now by being aware of Vedana. So if we're aware that we're experiencing pleasurable Vedana, if we're not aware, probably what will happen is we'll spoil it by wanting more of it. I'll give an example. So I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but let's say you're going out for a fancy meal. Yeah, it's a special occasion. Maybe it's your birthday. Maybe, I don't know, you've just got a new job, or maybe somebody's a friend or a family member's come back from abroad and you want to celebrate seeing them. So you go out for a nice meal. And you sit down at the restaurant and you get the menu, and you look down the menu and there's all manner of delicious items on the menu. And you think you kind of choose, and you look at the menu, I think I'll have that, that starter and that main course. And you just have a little peruse of the desserts just to see if there's anything that you'd like from the dessert menu. You think, maybe I'll have the, I don't know, the creme brulee or something. And you just file that away for future reference. But you choose your starter and your main course, and then the food comes out. And you start into your food, and as you're eating the starter, you have the first mouthful, and you enjoy it. And then as you begin to eat the starter, you start thinking about the main course that you're having. You start thinking, what was it again? Oh, that's right, I'm going to have that. And then the risotto, the mushroom risotto is going to be my main course. And then all of a sudden you look down at your starter and it's not there anymore. You've eaten it and you haven't noticed that you've been eating it because you've been sort of thinking about wanting more of it, and it's actually distracted you from the fact that you're actually having an experience. So you've actually spoiled your experience of the starter because you haven't been really there, experiencing it. You've been thinking about and ruminating on what's about to happen, which is your main course. So your main course arrives and you're really happy to have it. You slightly missed out on the first course, but you've got your main course. And you start eating it, and the same thing happens. As you're eating your main course, you're enjoying it, it's tasty, but you start thinking about that dessert list and what dessert you might have. So you're kind of thinking, will I have the creme brulee? Or will I have the panna cotta? Will I have the tiramisu? Maybe I'll just have ice cream tonight. Well, maybe there's some fruit, that'd be nice. So you're thinking away to yourself. And then again, the same thing happens. You look down at your plate and you realize that you kind of missed most of it because you've been thinking about wanting more of it and you haven't been experiencing what you've actually been having. So I say this partly because it's really important that we recognize that if we're more mindful, more pleasure will be available to us. We'll actually enjoy life more. I think this is really important because if we recognize that and we really believe that, like if we develop the conviction that that's true, then we'll really want to be mindful. It won't be a kind of a dutiful, pious kind of well-meaning kind of a practice. It'll be something that we'll just really want to do because we want our life to be more pleasurable and more enjoyable. So that's how, if we're aware of pleasant Vedana, we can basically be more present and enjoy life more by just relishing in that pleasant Vedana when it arises. Yeah, so that's how being mindful of pleasant Vedana can help us to just have a more enjoyable life where we're more present to what's going on. So pain, we generally don't want more of pain. Usually what we do, if we're not aware, is we react to pain by trying to push it away. This is really what hatred is. Hatred is an instinctual reaction to painful experience related to other people, usually, that we try and push away. So there's a kind of a clenching, a tension in the whole system, and not just the body, but the mind. So it's not just in the mind, but in the body as well, that tries to kind of push that experience out. So the Buddha talks in terms of, there's a famous teaching called the sutta, the discourse on the darts or the arrows. And he says, often in life, we're hit by an arrow and then we're hit by a second arrow. So he says that really we only need to be hit by the first arrow. We don't need to be hit by the second arrow. So you notice that, for example, in interpersonal conflict. So let's say you're beloved, if you've got a beloved or even a close friend, they say something to you which is unusually unkind. They wouldn't normally be unkind, but they say something a bit cutting, and it's painful. And then what happens is you get into the whole thing of like trying to figure out, well, why are they being? Why did they say that thing? Have they got some kind of beef with me? Have they got some kind of problem with me? What's going on here? And then you can start having this whole experience of resentment, maybe, or confusion, or disappointment that adds another layer of pain to what was the initial pain. So what the Buddha is saying is that you will be hit by one dart. Like that's part of life, is to experience pain. But what we don't need to do is add to that pain by doing all these other things, like getting resentful about it or worrying about it. And if we're sufficiently mindful of pain, then we can just stay with that pain and not get into all the other stuff. So you can see that what we're really trying to do with mindfulness of Vedana is just learn how to be with it, learn how to stay with it, and not immediately go into secondary thoughts and emotions from that Vedana. Hopefully you get what I'm talking about. Neutral Vedana. I mean, you might wonder, well, why bother having another category for neutral? Surely this is pleasant and painful. The reason for this is that neutral Vedana, in a way, we can react to that as well quite easily. we can get ourselves in a bit of a negative state just by reacting to neutral Vedana. So usually what we do if with neutral Vedana is we try and look for pleasure instead. So basically neutral Vedana is another way of saying boredom. So we're just bored. Nothing's really going on. And we react to it by seeking pleasure. That's usually what we do. So that typically what happens, well, it's maybe not typical, but an example of this is where you just find yourself, you're not quite sure how you got there, but you find yourself looking into the refrigerator. So you just open the fridge door and you're looking into it. You're not even quite sure why you're there. You can't quite remember how you got there. But it's just an instinctual knee-jerk response to being bored. You find yourself looking into the fridge. So it's weirdly, even pain can be better than boredom. I remember working in a shop in Dublin, and we had a security guard because it was in a bit of a rough part of the town, and we used to get people coming in and nicking stuff. And we had a security guard. And sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes the shop was quiet, and he would just stand there for several hours in a row and get very, very bored. And I noticed that one time he actually started this, he just kind of like started punching himself. He started punching himself in the leg. And I was wondering why he was doing that. I think what was happening is just so bored that even the experience of pain was preferable to just the sort of numbing boredom of having to stand for hours in a gift shop. Anyway, that's a slight digression, but it demonstrates, I suppose, that the point that it's important to be aware of neutral Vedana because we can react to it just as we can react to pleasurable Vedana and painful Vedana. So this is all quite key because it's our Vedana that gives rise to our emotions, our thoughts, and it's our thoughts that can give rise to a sense of constriction, a sense of being locked into an unhelpful, reactive state of mind, which is probably recognizing that is why a lot of us are here. So the really good news is that we can do something about that. And a lot of what this course is about is just coming back to the body and coming back to Vedana. So every time we get into a thought or a story, sort of building a kind of secondary world, we just keep coming back to what's immediately happening, what's actually here, and in terms of physical sensation, and in terms of Vedana, in terms of event, and in terms of our feeling about that event, whether that's sitting in a meeting, whether that's feeling anxious when you're meeting somebody, whether that's enjoying a bit of a sunny day, whether that's having a nice coffee with a friend, just being with the immediate Vedana, the immediate feeling tone of that, staying with that, and letting go of the sort of secondary narratives that arise from that. So that's really the key thing that I'd like you to kind of go away with this week. There's more about it in the book, as always, but that's really what the key message really is this week, is keeping on coming back to Vedana. So in terms of the home practice this week, the first thing is to set up a daily meditation practice. So we've already, hopefully you've already had a good go at this, but I'd really like to encourage you this week to really think about that and to do that. So basically what we're doing when we learn to meditate is we're learning to keep coming back to what's immediately happening right in the here and now, particularly through the body, and through the body we get more of a sense of Vedana. So if we practice that every day, it means that in the rest of our day we'll be much more attuned to that, we'll be much more sensitive to the different experiences that happen, and we'll be much more able to stay with the kind of raw experience. So meditation is just an absolutely indispensable practice for the development of mindfulness, for the development of the ability to stay with Vedana. There's a day-by-day guide in the book if you want to follow that for meditation. Or what you can do is you can just revisit the meditation from earlier on, and by going onto the YouTube clip, you can just listen in if you want to. Now, if you've already got a meditation practice, By the way, just to remind you as well about the posture, to have a look at that video about posture. I'd really strongly recommend you do that. Yeah. So yeah, if you're already meditating, you've already got an established practice. What could you do this week to sharpen up your practice? I was saying this last week, but you can always do something. So it might be, if you've got a practice of the mindfulness of breathing, this week you might like to tune into those different diaphragms and seeing if you can just become more sensitive to what's going on in your body. And if you're able to do that, it will help answer that question and experience that was asked earlier on about how to get interested in your body. In a way, you have to your attention needs to become more subtle. And if it can become more subtle, then you can get interested in what's going on as you breathe. So that's the first thing. It's the daily meditation. So what I want to do now is just stop talking for 2 minutes and just let you reflect. You might like to make little notes in your book or on a piece of paper or just mental notes. Just think about, well, if you're still establishing a daily meditation, what can you do this week to really cement that into your routine? You would have learned things. We've been going for a couple of weeks now, so you'll know what the challenges are. You might have been talking about them in the group earlier. So what can you do this week to kind of meet those challenges? It might mean being a little bit less busy. It might be a little bit more organized. It might mean going to bed a little bit earlier and watching a little bit less telly, or I don't know. You'll know yourself. So I'll just, like I say, stop talking for a couple of minutes and just let you reflect on that. If you're an already established meditator, how are you going to sharpen up your practice? So part of what you're trying to do here is imagine yourself actually doing it. Doing the thing that you intend to do. Imagine doing the thing that you intend to do. So just another minute to reflect on your meditation practice this week. Okay, so that's the first thing for this week is the meditation. The second thing is what's called a breathing space. So really what this is like a short meditation. It's like doing a meditation, instead of doing it for 20 minutes, doing it for 3 minutes. And doing this several times a day. So what you're doing is you're touching into this very fundamental act of paying attention to the immediate experience of your body and your surroundings. And it really just needs to be 3 minutes long. Sometimes it's called a 3-minute breathing space. And so first of all, what you do is you just pay attention to your body for a minute, and then you pay attention to sounds, and then you pay attention to your breathing just for a minute. and then you bring the meditation to a close and pick up what it is that you were doing. So we'll actually just do that now. So I'll just lead us through that again, so we've got a sense of what that is. So you don't just if you just maybe close your eyes so you're not looking at the screen anymore. You don't need to sit in a special way, because we're only going to be here for 3 minutes. And start by tuning into your body. So what do you feel in your body? What do you feel as your body touches the seat that you're sitting on? And then noticing sound. So there might be sound coming from the room that you're in, maybe from your computer. There might be sound coming from the building. Maybe you can hear sounds from outside, street noise or other noises. But don't worry too much about what's producing the sound. Just notice the fact of sound. And then tuning into your breathing. Tuning into what your body does as you breathe. And then just bringing the practice to a close. So that's what a 3-minute breathing space is, a short meditation. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is to do that 3 times a day. There's more about it in the book, but that's the basic gist of it. Yeah. So paying attention to your body, then sounds, and then your breathing. So the really difficult thing about this, about the breathing space, is remembering to do it. So what I'd suggest you do is try and tie it into something that you already do. So it might be that when you sit down at your desk, you just sit there for 3 minutes. You could even just set a timer on your phone so you don't have to worry about time. Then maybe after you've had it, if you have a coffee break, after you've had your coffee, you could sit for 3 minutes. You might even, let's say you make your coffee at home, or your tea. You could just decide to sit there while the tea's brewing or the coffee's brewing. Or tea steeps, doesn't it? Or the tea is steeping and the coffee's brewing. So how will you remember to do this practice? So that's the question for you now. So just reflecting on that yourself at the moment. How are you going to remember to do a breathing space 3 times a day? If that really feels like, whoa, I'm never going to do that, then do it twice a day. But just make sure that, if you're going to do it twice a day, that you really do it twice a day. What's going to be your cue, so to speak? And if you've already done all that and you're just waiting, you could just watch your breathing. So just be with your breathing while you wait. So it's really good to be definite. If you go into the week with just a vague sense of, well, I'll do a bit of a breathing space once in a while, it probably won't happen. You'll forget. So part of what you're trying to do at this point is to formulate a clear intention that's actually realistic and specific. And you're much more likely to remember to do it if you decide to do it really wholeheartedly, make a wholehearted decision to actually do it. That's part of the challenge. So the third thing for this week is the mindful walk. So I was talking earlier about this distinction between peripheral vision and central vision, and how that is an analogy to like peripheral awareness and focused awareness. So with the mindful walking, in a way, you need to keep that peripheral awareness, but at the same time, you bring your focus to the movements of your body in particular. What will keep drawing you away most probably will be thoughts about this and thoughts about that. And like I was saying earlier, don't try and push them away. Just come back and try and get interested. Try and be curious about what your body is doing. And particularly this week, we've been doing this practice for a little while now. This is our second week of practice of the mindful walk. Try and see if you can notice Vedana. So just notice the way Vedana happens in the body. If you need a focus for that practice, something a little bit more concrete, then you could bring your attention to the soles of the feet touching the ground. So that's a really, really good way of anchoring yourself. So again, I'll just allow a minute. Just if there's anything that you'd like to bring into your mindful walking this week, it might be something that you discussed in your small group. Okay, so I'll just remind you of what we're taking on to do this week, and then I've just noticed there's a couple of questions which I'll endeavour to answer. So the first thing this week is the daily meditation, and what I'm suggesting that you do if you're new to meditation is to follow the meditation that I did earlier. Then there's the breathing space. So 3 times a day, taking 3 minutes to be aware of your body, sounds, and your breathing. And then thirdly, the mindful walk. And in the mindful walk, paying particular attention to the experience of Vedana. So those are the 3 things to practice this week for the course. And also do read the book. There's some really, really good stuff in the book that will flesh out some of the things that we've looked at so far. So there's with regard to Vedana, would numbness, withdrawnness, lack of empathy or feeling towards an experience be classified as neutral, painful, or something different? Well, in a way, it's a little bit like, I think I was talking about that a couple of weeks ago. It would be alienation, where you know something's there, but you don't experience it. So what we're trying to cultivate is this kind of integrated awareness, where we're not just aware of the existence of something, but we actually feel that particular thing. So that's part of why it's important to be aware of Vedana, to really know it, to feel it, so that awareness that we have is more integrated. So I think that's what I would recently I was talking to somebody who was coming off antidepressants, and they were saying that one of the things that can happen is this kind of this disassociation, I think was the term. But again, it's a matter of just trying to stay with experience, and really and not just from the outside, but from the inside, to be with it. Hopefully that makes sense. I mean, one of the difficulties with responding to text is that you can't get a sense of how it's landing with the person. And someone's asking, could I ask, what is the difference between body scan and meditation? So there isn't really a difference. I would just say a body scan is a kind of meditation. There's lots of different kinds of meditation. So there's lots of different ways of meditating on the body. So the body scan is one particular form of meditation. And you could say that meditation is just a particularly intensive application of mindfulness. Is it okay to do the breathing space with eyes open? Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. It's you also saying that question, a soft focus. So so again, you're not. What's really interesting about having the eyes open is you can have your eyes open without particularly looking at anything, if you see what I mean. In the same way that you can hear something without listening to it. So it's interesting that even the way that we talk about our senses, that we can see without looking, or we can hear without listening, suggests that we can make the shift in the quality of our attention, and that's what mindfulness is rather than just hearing, just listening. So rather than just hearing, listening, rather than just seeing, looking, and then we're applying that to our body. So rather than just experience kind of running on without us noticing it, actually paying attention to it, and that completely changes the experience. It's really fascinating. Does breathing space need to be spread out through the day? So one each in the morning, afternoon, and night. That would probably be ideal. Yeah. So it's a bit like your meditation, it's like your really strong engagement with developing awareness, with developing mindfulness, and those 3 breathing spaces are 3, and the mindful walk are a way of dipping into that during the course of the day. So the mindful walking will be more diffuse, but in a way that the breathing space could be, you're actively only trying to be aware of body, sounds, and breath. So it's a more intensive practice. So if you've got more questions, I'll be around afterwards for a little bit. So yeah, do please stick around. And let me just see, is there anything I need to tell you? Just to remind you as well about the video that I'll send you about the posture. So yeah, do have a look at that. It'd be really worth giving some attention to your meditation posture. And just to remind you that at present we're doing all of our events free of charge. So we'd ask you to consider making a donation just to help us to continue to operate in this way. So I think Daniel might be so kind as just to put that link in the text box. So yeah, so good luck with your practice this week, and I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. And next Tuesday we're going to be looking at the mind, so awareness, mindfulness of the mind itself, so thoughts and emotions in particular. So yeah, so that's it. So yeah, have a good week.